This is Mike of Genuine Chit-Chat and Dan of Spider Dan and the Secret Boars, and we are here in Bristol at the end of the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival, and we just want to introduce this video to say we had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Gale Anne Hurd, legendary producer of Aliens, Tremors and so much more, and this video is actually ourselves and other members of the press team interviewing Gale Anne Hurd, asking her a few questions of a variety of different topics, including a few that Dan asked about aliens and world building and all kinds of incredible other things, including some of her superhero films that a lot of you may not know. So strap in, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic time, and thanks again to the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival. All of the details of those involved are in the description.
Yes, check it out. It's been an absolute pleasure to be involved and associate with Forbidden Worlds, and I'm so glad Mike was here to experience it for the very first time. It's been very special, and this very thing that we did, this very recording, is very special to me and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Should we go? Let's just go clockwise from here, shall we?
Yes.
And your name is?
My name is Daniel.
Okay.
I was asking the most difficult questions last night, so I'm going to continue.
Okay, good.
So I have to say, in all of your films, your world building is incredible. I think it's really important, and it just absolutely engrosses you in the environment, in the universe, or expanding on a pre-existing universe. And for me, one of your best was Cast a Deadly Spell with Fred Ward.
Oh my God.
I love that so much, the Lovecraftian noir elements.
And Julianne Moore.
Exactly, like you were saying last night, the casting director was, Clancy
Pam
Brown's
Dixon.
in there.
Yes.
I just wanted to know how involved that idea of world building is in the creation of any and all of it.
It's essential. And the key thing really is, as I keep saying over and over again, is it comes from character. You want to establish a world in which the characters that feature in the film or TV series work and there's a consistency. You have to have the canon, even if it's just a one-off, like Cast a Deadly Spell. You still have to have the canon. What are the rules of the universe? What can and can't be done? What kind of magic can be used? What kind of magic can't be used? What is the villain or the monster capable of? And so yes, it's absolutely essential. And I love the fact that we're able to create the visual set pieces that reinforce it. So even if something's in the deep background, it's consistent with the universe that we've created.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing. It's quite a simple question
and your name
in premise.
Is?
Mike from Genuine Chit-Chat. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's quite a simple question, and so answer this as complex or ambiguously as you'd like, but what is film to you? Considering you've spent your entire life really putting, blood, sweat and tears into it, being a producer is not easy, so many stories from basically every film you've worked on have had their massive challenges, obviously, as we all know from the Aliens discussion yesterday. So really, what is film to you? Why does it mean so much to you? Why have you invested so much of your life into it?
Well, it used to be 24 frames per second.
Very good. Very good.
That's not the case anymore. But it is, I think it's the visual immersive storytelling that takes us as an audience into the lives of characters we may never meet, but we can identify with, and that we invest in their journeys. It's why I very much like science fiction, fantasy, and horror, because of the world building. Because you can create worlds that anything you can imagine, but you want to populate it with characters that the audience can believe in and are invested in as they follow their journey. So, it started with my love for literature. So the love of science fiction, fantasy, and horror back when I was a kid. Always. And the other thing about it is that what speculative fiction allows you to do is to comment on what the world we're living in now is facing. And not just preach to the choir of people who already believe like you do, but perhaps invite people who don't to reconsider their worldviews.
That's very insightful. Yeah. Essentially, teaching people who aren't necessarily asking to be taught. Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I thought I was working out.
Was my question that difficult?
Stressful, these questions.
Oh, that was too much. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that.
You've been a tremendous inspiration to a lot of producers, and particularly women coming up. I was wondering if there were any inspirational figures. I'm Robin, sorry. I was wondering if there were any inspirational figures who got you interested in film to start with when you were coming up, or people who you looked to. Because producers.
Okay, well, this is a long answer.
Good.
Sorry to all the rest of you. And Ty, can you take a couple of photos of just sort of candids?
Yeah.
I know you have another job to do. You can do it with mine.
Brilliant.
So, when I was growing up, this is not a case of nepotism, really, when you hear the story. But my mother and all of her sisters grew up in Culver City. So, like in many countries and many cities, the factory there was MGM Studios. So they all worked at MGM Studios. So my mother was the secretary to Jack Dawn, who was the head of the makeup department. Interesting tidbit, his great nephew, Jeff Dawn, was the makeup artist and head of department who did all the makeup on the Terminator. I mean, we only found that out when I said, "You're Jeff Dawn, are you related to Jack Dawn?" One of my aunts, as I mentioned yesterday, I think when we were having lunch, was a stunt. Well, she was an extra. She was a double, but she also did stunts because back then there were no such things as stunt women. And so she doubled for Merle Oberon in Wuthering Heights. She was the one bitten by the Dobermans climbing over the fence. Another one doubled. She also doubled for Louise Reiner in The Good Earth. So I would hear all these stories about working in the film industry. Now, when they got married, they didn't continue because you didn't work unless you needed to once you got married. But I didn't think of that as a career really. And then when I got to Stanford, when I was at Stanford, another British connection, I went to the foreign study program at Stanford in Britain, which was at Cliveden House, which is now a very posh country house hotel, was then a falling down pile with no hot water and no heat. But it was the Astor Estate where the Profumo affair occurred, and it has a storied history. It's a beautiful building owned by the National Trust. But it happened to be an intensive program in two things: economics, which was my major at the time, and also British film and broadcasting. So British Film and Broadcasting, the two people who led the program were Basil Wright, who essentially co-invented the documentary form with John Grierson at the National Film Board of Canada, and also Anthony and Tony Smith, who co-founded Channel 4 and was the head of the British Film Institute at the time. And so every day we had these incredible speakers come in, and we watched 2 to 3 movies a day, documentaries and the great British classics. And I thought, oh my God, you can study this? And I was also very lucky because my first mentor was the professor from Stanford who founded the program, Julian Blaustein. Near and dear to my heart, 2 reasons. First reason, he produced the original Day the Earth Stood Still. With my love of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, I could not have stumbled onto a better mentor. And he bonded with me over our mutual love for science fiction, which back then was considered, until 2001 came out, it was really considered, why in the world would you want to do these really tawdry films? And then another professor, Stephen Kovacs, who back at Stanford went to work for Roger Corman, and Roger was looking for an assistant. And in the only instance of having the best GPA in the communications department, Roger wanted the student with the best GPA in the communications department as his assistant. And they reached out to me and offered me an interview. So that's sort of how I ended up in film. I was recruited. I really don't know how. I would never have ended up in film if it hadn't been for those various, unlikely serendipitous series of events.
Thank you.
Would you like some water? I don't want to reach over while recording. Apologies. Sorry about that.
And your name is?
Matthew. So you worked producing for both film and television. What would you say the difference is between producing for film and producing something for television?
Well, if you're producing a series as opposed to a pilot or a one-off, that's a marathon. Some of my movies turned into marathons. They weren't originally, that way. It's that's sort of like a sprint. I was an athlete in college and I ran. I was a runner, so that's why this resonates for me. And with TV in the era of streaming and the storytelling that isn't procedural, so serialized content, even if it's a series, it's still serialized. You're building from character, so you're building out character, and everything derives from character as opposed to from plot that's solved in a single episode. And luckily, my foray into television coincided with serialized storytelling. So what I love about it is the ability to follow characters and watch them grow and change, which, in a movie you have between 90 minutes and, and clearly a few hours with some filmmakers to tell a character-driven story. And it's very hard to do that. I think that if you want to learn a lot about character, if you want to explore character, television is a really good medium for that.
Thank you.
Good question.
I thought I'm not really even supposed to be here, so I feel like
I'm assuming you have a name.
yeah, Sam Fergus. I honestly, I was just hanging out with these guys and suddenly we're walking somewhere and I'm like, cool.
Serendipitous.
That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
got here too.
So I really haven't prepared anything, but you were talking last night about The Abyss, and I recently watched it again. And some of the behind the scenes and stuff. I wondered if you could just talk a bit more about. It looked like such a fucking challenge to film. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, if that's okay.
Well, honestly, if you think about it, we're all crazy because nothing existed to create that movie when Jim imagined it. And the other thing to know is that was based on a story that Jim had when he was 13 or 14 years old, growing up in Chippewa, Canada, on the Niagara River. And so many of the stories that he's telling incorporate what he was inspired by as a youth. And so he wanted to tell a story that, what I loved, of course, in addition to everything else, was the fact that it was also a callback to the day the Earth stood still. And, Encounter with Aliens, our mistrust of aliens, what we're doing to ourselves and to the planet, and the danger we as a species pose, as well as the magic of the underwater world, and the mystical, magical encounter that Lindsay has with the MTI. So the challenges were literally everything. We brought in Al Giddings, who was our underwater cinematographer, and he basically said, okay, well, the only thing I've filmed has been in the Bahamas, and we realized that you don't want to be at the mercy of the actual ocean. You can't control it. Waterworld. Need I say more? So we realized then that we needed a tank. And then we found out that the filming tanks weren't filtered and heated. So there was the big tank in Malta, but it wasn't filtered and heated, so you couldn't film underwater. There were no lights. There were no underwater HMI lights. We had to create those. There was no way to record sound in the helmets underwater. We had to create those. We had to create the filming tank. So I found a company that had built dams before. Okay, great. You know how many years it takes to build a goddamn dam? A lot longer than we had. And I remember I'd be meeting with them going, this isn't going to be ready in time. Oh, no, it is. I said, where is your percentage complete? And he said, what is that? I said, well, it's how we determine how we're doing on a film, and I'm sure other industries as well, so that we know. And he created one. He said, oh, we're in trouble. And I said, yeah, I mean, I know nothing about what you do for a living, but I could see that. And that's why, if you've seen the making of Under Pressure, you'll see that they were painting the deep core while the water was filling the tank. But he finished it in time, and we had to have crews working 24 hours a day, and then of course we didn't want to shoot night for night, so we had a cover. Well, the first big storm that came in, that blew off, and then we put little beads on the surface to try to, so that it would look like it was that deep in the Cayman Trench, the Cayman Trough, and then those got into the divers' ears. I mean, literally, one of the funny stories is one of the line items we had in the budget was 2 hot tubs. And Fox immediately said, you can't have hot tubs. I mean, what is this? Like Club Med? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Even though the water's going to be heated to maybe 84 degrees, anything that's not 98.6, people are going to become hypothermic. And they're going to be in the water for 12 hours a day. They need to warm up. I mean, you can just imagine. And those were the easy, those battles were. And then, of course, Fox they had an administration change. So the people who had approved the movie were no longer there anymore. So the new administration sent someone down to reel us in because we were spending too much money. Well, the good news is they sent a lovely man, oh God, what was his name? Harold. Anyway, I'll come up with it. But anyway, Harold immediately actually understood production. He came down and said, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing so well. And so he called back to 20th Century Fox and said, no, you don't understand. It's amazing what they're pulling off. So they sent a suit down who knew nothing about production. Long story that, who shows up in a limo and is staying 2 hours away, which is where the only 5-star hotel was. The rest of us were staying at literally $10, $20 a night motels, and starts telling us. So the first thing he does is, the drowning scene. We needed a huge crane to hold the module. So that it was repeatable, so we could get the water to fill up at the right and reshoot the scenes. He sent the crane home. Luckily, I went running after the crane operator. Now, at the time, the Southeast was so busy with home construction that company could have made a lot more money working on a home construction. I ran after the guy and said, please don't leave. And he said, look, you guys have been so great to us, we'll stay. And I had to call Barry Diller, the head of 20th Century Fox, and say, we won't be able to finish the movie thanks to your executive. Needless to say, that did not endear me to this executive, who then had it in for me the rest of the movie. But that gives you just a small idea, and that's not even talking about what ILM had to do in creating the water snake. So.
Well, that's great, thank you.
Just tying into that makes me think of Roger Corman, stories like that. One story I read recently, which you might be able to shed some light on, was James Cameron's habit of hiding people whenever Corman came to set on Battle Beyond the Stars, because if Corman saw someone working on a set, he'd lose his mind.
Oh God, yes.
So whether the set was finished or not,
oh God, yes.
if Roger arrived, they had to all be hidden.
No. And we were working 24 hours a day, and even though I was the assistant production manager, I was spray painting sets. I was doing whatever needed to be done, which is why Jim and I bonded, because he's always been like that. I've always been like that. And no, exactly. I mean, it's, and people would then, be hiding behind machinery and hiding behind flats and all of that. And, and we had to keep Roger from touching paint that was still wet or walking along, things that had just been spray painted silver. So yes, it was.
Apparently the message was Jennifer is coming. That was.
I
what
don't recall.
Everyone
But
in his studio would get on the walkie-talkies. Jennifer's coming, and everyone would hide every expensive-looking bit of equipment and any staff members who weren't doing anything.
yeah.
Hi, Gale. I'm Nathan. It's great to talk to you, and why the franchises that you've kind of built with Aliens, Terminator, and The Walking Dead, it's kind of incredible that you're such a fundamental factor within that. I was wondering then, with your creations, how they're then handed to other people to then change directions or put their own stamp on it.
I don't know what you mean by that.
As in, like, so you've done Aliens and then someone else did Alien 3 or Resurrection.
What's it? I think maybe what's it like handing over one of your babies?
It was more
to
like
someone else.
You know what? Once you realize that you're a gun for hire, like we were in Aliens, you accept that that's, going in. It was harder with the Terminator franchise not being involved in that anymore. So I don't watch them.
There you go.
That's, it's like.
That answers my question.
And the reason is because someone like you will ask me, what did you think of them? And I can then say, I haven't seen it.
That ties in with something. What do you think of Tremors 2?
I haven't seen it.
The reason I ask is fascinatingly to me, it's basically a remake of Aliens. I don't know if anyone's ever put this to you before, but the plot is identical. The characters are identical. It's very strange. Anyway,
Thank you for that.
No, you have no reason to sit. I'm Ben.
Hi, Ben.
I guess I wanted to ask a bit about, we talk a lot about New World and we talk a lot about Roger Corman and we talk a lot about all the mentors that helped you kind of get to where you are. And I think a lot about where the industry is now. I think a lot about producers now. And I think a lot about kind of people coming up who would have been in your position in their 20s who want to make it in this industry. Do you think there is still a world like Roger Corman's that people like you could come up with?
No.
What do you think the alternative is for people who, I don't know, in their 20s but do want to make inroads?
Have a day job. Look at this as something you can't live without doing, but don't bet the farm on this being a stable source of income.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it is for a few people. Shonda Rhimes.
Yeah.
Yes, there are exceptions, but you cannot count on the exceptions. And, with the advent of AI and the desire for networks and streamers and studios to get rid of as many human beings as possible, which I think is abhorrent. I can't. I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you how bad it's going to get, but it's certainly never going to be like it was when I started out. And I have a lot of interns who come through my company, and I make sure I have a whole program for them, and we have speakers, and and I always counsel them with the same thing, which is make sure that you have a skill set you can be paid for. And with each person, it's going to be different because it depends on their skill set. But back in the day when I was starting out, once you had a foothold, like after Terminator, because there was no foothold really before. There was a slippery wall, but there was no foothold until after Terminator. And then, as a producer, if you were considered legitimate, you could get a development deal. So a development deal, it was fantastic. So a studio would hire you to oversee the development of a script, and you'd be paid $25,000. It was fantastic. So if you had 4 or more, that was great. And, so obviously you needed to keep up the track record of making movies and making successful movies, but you didn't need to be in production all the time. Now, there is no such thing as a development deal. There are a few people who have overall deals, but they're few and far between.
Do we have time for any more questions?
We've got about 10 minutes, so yeah.
Yes.
Rapid fire.
Yeah. I'll answer more precise. It's very hard for me to be short-winded.
That's great.